"You're in the wrong waiting room." He said it quietly. Not loudly enough to make a scene, but loudly enough that the woman sitting 2 seats over glanced up from her magazine. That was the point. It always is. The man he was talking to didn't move right away. He set down his coffee cup. The kind you get from the cart near the elevator, paper with a cardboard sleeve that's always slightly too loose, and looked at the person who had just said those words to him. Looked at him the way a man looks at something he's seen before and never had the energy to be surprised by anymore. His name was Leonard Achebe, 53 years old. Salt in his beard now, more than there used to be. He wore a gray wool coat, the kind with the double-breasted buttons that doctors who've been practicing for 30 years tend to wear without thinking about it. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, because they bought it in 2009 and it still fits and it's warm, and that's enough. He had driven 4 hours from Ottawa to get to this hospital, not because he had to, because they asked him to. The man standing over him was named Craig Vosberg. He was the patient services coordinator for the Lakewood Medical Center's 3rd-floor cardiac wing. He was 41, had a laminated badge clipped to his lanyard, and wore the particular expression of someone who had decided, in the first 2 seconds of seeing Leonard Achebe sitting in that chair, that a mistake had been made. "This waiting area," Vosberg said again, slower this time, as though the problem might be comprehension, "is for immediate family of patients in the cardiac ICU. Leonard Achebe looked at him. "I know," he said. "So my sister is in room 314. A pause. Vosberg glanced at the woman with the magazine again, as if she might confirm something for him. She didn't look up this time. "I'll need you to check in at the main desk," Vosberg said. "They'll verify." "I checked in at the main desk," Leonard said, 40 minutes ago. The woman at the desk, Pauline, I think her name was, she gave me the blue wristband." He held up his left wrist. The blue band was there. "She told me 3rd floor. Cardiac family lounge, turn left out of the elevator, so I turned left out of the elevator." Vosberg looked at the wristband. Something moved across his face. Not embarrassment, not yet. Just a brief recalculation. "There may have been a miscommunication," he said. "There wasn't," Leonard said. He picked up his coffee cup again. He did it slowly, the way a man does when he's decided that this conversation is over and he's giving the other person the dignity of choosing to end it themselves. Vosberg did not choose to end it. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the front desk so we can sort this out properly." There were 7 other people in that lounge, a woman in her 60s knitting something blue. 2 adult siblings. You could tell by the way they sat. Close but not touching, the particular exhaustion of people who grew up in the same house and are now sharing a grief they haven't spoken about yet. A man in his late 30s with a sleeping toddler draped across his lap. An elderly gentleman reading a folded newspaper with the concentrated focus of someone trying very hard not to think. Every single one of them was white. Not one of them had been asked to come to the front desk to sort anything out. Leonard Achebe knew this. He was not surprised by it. He had not been surprised this particular thing in a very long time. That doesn't make it lighter. People sometimes assume that familiarity with injustice is the same as being okay with it. It is not. It is simply the accumulated weight of a life spent calculating, in every new room you walk into, how much energy this is going to cost you today. He stood up, not because Vosberg had authority over him, but because the alternative, a prolonged public scene in a room full of strangers while his sister was 30 feet away with tubes in her arm, was not something Leonard Achebe was willing to give anyone. He followed Vosberg to the elevator. You have to understand something about Leonard Achebe before this story goes any further. He was not the kind of man who talked about himself. His colleagues at the University of Toronto called him meticulous. His residents, he had trained dozens of them over the years, called him demanding but fair. His patients, the ones who were conscious and able to form impressions of the man at the foot of their bed, sometimes described him afterward as the quietest doctor they'd ever had. Not cold, just quiet. The kind of quiet that came from spending 40-minute surgeries in a concentration so complete that small talk had been physically engineered out of him. He had grown up in Sudbury, the second of 4 children. His father had worked at the smelter for 22 years. His mother had been a school librarian. They had come from Nigeria in 1968 with a suitcase and a plan, and the particular stubbornness that seems to run in the Achebe family like a genetic trait. a deep, almost pathological refusal to let the world tell them what was and wasn't possible for people like them. Leonard had been accepted to medical school at 22. He'd done his residency in Toronto, his fellowship in London, England, and then come home because that was always the plan. He'd spent 26 years specializing in cardiothoracic surgery. He had performed over 4,000 procedures. He had been published in 17 peer-reviewed journals. He held a named chair at the university. He had 2 kids, both grown, both doing well. None of that was visible in the gray wool coat. That was the thing Vosburg had looked at and made his decision from the coat. The coffee cup, the color of the man's skin, and the way he was sitting there, alone in a chair in a waiting room where Vosburg had decided, without asking a single question, that he did not belong. The front desk on the 3rd floor was staffed by a young woman named Tessa. She was maybe 24, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the look of someone who was on hour 7 of an 8-hour shift and had already handled 3 separate family disputes today and was not enthusiastic about a 4th. Vosburg stopped at the desk with the bearing of a man who was about to be proven right about something. "I need you to verify this gentleman's authorization for the cardiac family lounge," he said. Tessa looked at Leonard, then at the blue wristband, then she typed something. Then she looked at the screen, then she looked up. Vosburg turned. "Achibi," Leonard said. "Achebe, right, sorry. Dr. Achibi, yes, you're fully verified. Your sister is Vivian Achibi Quarty, room 314. Dr. Nwosu has you listed as next of kin and approved contact." She paused. "Did you need anything else? I can get you an updated wristband if yours is." "The wristband is fine," Leonard said. "Thank you, Tessa." He turned and walked back toward the lounge. Behind him, he heard nothing. No apology, no acknowledgement, the sound of a man in a lanyard badge standing at a desk deciding that whatever had just happened was not something that required him to say anything out loud. Leonard had heard that silenced before. He knew its shape. He walked back to his chair, sat down, and picked up his coffee cup, which had gone lukewarm while he was gone. His sister had been admitted 4 days earlier. A cardiac event. That was what the hospital had called it when they phoned, a phrase that meant almost nothing and everything at the same time. By the time Leonard had cleared his schedule, arranged coverage for his patients, and driven up from Ottawa through a late November snowstorm, Vivienne was stable. Tired, but stable. She had their mother's eyes and their father's stubbornness, and when Leonard walked into room 314 and she saw his face, she said, "You didn't have to come." "I know," he said. "I'm fine. I know. You canceled surgeries. Rescheduled." She looked at him. "How was the drive?" "Fine," he said. Roads were clear by Barry. He pulled up the chair beside her bed and they talked for an hour and a half. Not about her condition, not really. They both understood the medical situation well enough that it didn't need to be narrated. They talked about their brother Nanamdi's new house in Brampton, about their niece who had just started a degree in environmental science, about the fact that their mother, if she were still alive, would have already flown up from wherever she was and been sitting in this room delivering opinions about hospital food. They laughed about that. It was the kind of laugh that sounds like grief with the lid slightly off. When Vivian fell asleep, Leonard went back to the family lounge. Vosburg was gone. The woman with the knitting was still there. The elderly man with the newspaper had been replaced by a younger woman on a laptop. The siblings were still sitting the same way, close, but not touching. Leonard sat. He sat for a long time. What happened next, he did not plan. He was not someone who planned scenes. The whole course of his life had been in many ways a deliberate practice of not making scenes. In his experience, scenes cost more than they were worth, and they were almost always paid for by the person who could least afford them. But sometimes the scene comes to you. It was around 4:30 in the afternoon. A different coordinator had appeared at the entrance to the lounge. A woman this time, compact, efficient-looking, with a tablet in her hand. She was doing what appeared to be a routine check, asking people their names, confirming patient connections, making notes. She was quick about it, professional. When she got to Leonard, she looked at her tablet and said, "And you're here for?" in the clipped tone of someone with 12 more things to do. "Vivienne Achebe Quarty," Leonard said. "Room 314, she typed. "Relationship? Brother." She looked up briefly. Something crossed her face. Not hostility exactly, more like recalibration. She looked at her tablet again. Yes, she looked up again, this time differently. "The Dr. Achebe? From U of T?" He didn't say anything. I did my nursing training at Toronto Western, she said. Dr. Nwosu, he trained under you, didn't he? He talks about you constantly. He's the one treating your sister. She shook her head. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were here. She paused. Has anyone been taking care of you? Do you need anything? There's a physician's lounge on the 4th floor. I can have someone. This lounge is fine, Leonard said. She nodded. She had the good grace to look slightly abashed, though Leonard wasn't sure exactly what she was abashed about, whether she was sorry for the question she'd asked or sorry for not recognizing him sooner, which was a different kind of sorries and in some ways more complicated. He didn't sort it out. He let it go. He was good at letting things go. This is not the same as things not mattering. Craig Vosberg came back at 5:20. Leonard had his eyes closed. He wasn't asleep. He was the kind of person who could sit in a room for several hours and be comfortable in his own head, which is a skill that surgical training either builds or destroys, depending on the person. He heard the footsteps. He heard the pause. He opened his eyes. Vosberg was standing at the lounge entrance. He had a folder in his hand and the particular posture of a man who had been told something in the last half hour that he was still processing. He walked over. He stopped 2 feet away from Leonard's chair. He said, Doctor. Achibi, not sir, not excuse me. He said it like a name, like he was reading it off a list and making sure he'd pronounced it correctly, which he hadn't. The emphasis was wrong, but Leonard had long ago stopped correcting strangers about that. I wanted to. Vosberg started. He stopped. He tried again. I want to apologize for earlier. I was not. I made an assumption that was incorrect, and I was not appropriate in how I handled the situation, and I apologize. He said it like he was reading from something he'd written down. Maybe he had. People who are forced to apologize often do that. They prepare a version that sounds correct and then deliver it in the flattest possible register, which is its own kind of tell. Leonard looked at him for a moment. He thought about the woman at the front desk saying Dr. Ashchibi and watching Vosberg's shoulders change shape. He thought about the blue wristband he'd been given 40 minutes before Vosberg decided it wasn't valid. He thought about the other 7 people in this lounge who had not been asked to prove anything. He thought about his father, who had worked 22 years at a smelter and never once in Leonard's memory complained about a single day of it, because that was not the kind of man he was, but who had said once at the kitchen table when Leonard was maybe 12 years old that the most expensive thing a black man can spend is his dignity, and the only way to make sure you never run out of it is to never let anyone else hold the account. Thank you, Leonard said. That was all. Not it's okay. Not I appreciate it. Just thank you. The 2 words that close a door without slamming it. Vosberg nodded. He left. The woman with the knitting looked up. She had heard everything. She had the expression of someone who wanted to say something and didn't know what. Leonard gave her a small nod, the kind that says, I know, it's all right, you don't need to. She went back to her knitting. Dr. Nwosu came out at 6:15. He was tall, maybe 38, with the energy of someone who had been awake since 5 in the morning and intended to stay awake until midnight, because that was simply what was required. When he saw Leonard in the hallway, his face opened up in a way that faces don't usually open up in hospital corridors. Professor, he said, and he said it with a particular emphasis that told Leonard this was not a professional formality, but something else. The word that a man uses when the person in front of him shaped the version of himself he most respects. They shook hands. Nwosu held on a second longer than professional custom required. She's doing well, Nwosu said. Better than this morning. We're going to want to keep her a few more days, run the full panel, but the outlook is, it's good. It's genuinely good. Leonard exhaled, just once, through his nose, the way a man exhales when he's been holding something for 4 days and just got permission to put it down. Thank you, he said, for looking after her. Nwosu shook his head. She's family, he said, and what he meant was, you taught me what that word means in this building. They stood in the hallway together for a moment, 2 men who had spent their lives in rooms that were not always built, with people like them in mind, standing in the particular silence of people who do not need to explain anything to each other. Leonard went back to Vivienne's room at 7. She was awake. She had her phone and was squinting at something on the screen with the focused displeasure of a woman who has just discovered that her nephew has posted something questionable on the internet. Everything okay? Leonard asked. Namdi's son, she said without looking up, has decided that sunglasses indoors is a personality. Leonard sat down. He's 22, he said. That's not an excuse. They sat together for another hour. The window behind Vivian's bed faced east, and by 8 o'clock the sky outside had gone the particular deep blue of a Canadian November night. Not black yet, just the deepest blue, the color of the sky right before it gives up the last of the light. Inside, the room was warm. The monitors made their small, steady sounds. At some point, Vivian said, without looking up from her phone, "Something happened today." It wasn't a question. Leonard looked at her. "You have that face," she said. "The face you had when you were 14 and someone did something to you and you decided not to tell Mum about it." He said nothing for a moment. Then he told her, not all of it. Not the full accounting, not the way it had sat in his chest all afternoon like a stone he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Just the facts. The lounge, Vosburg, the wristband, the walk to the front desk. Vivian listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Did he apologize?" she asked. "He did. A real one, or a 'I'm sorry you feel that way' one?" Leonard thought about it. "Somewhere between," he said. Vivian made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "This country," she said, "not with bitterness. The way you say something about weather, it just is what it is, and you dress for it, and some years are worse than others." "He was young," Leonard said. "Young doesn't mean ignorant." "No," Leonard agreed. "It doesn't." She looked at him then, really looked, the way sisters look at brothers when they've known them for 53 years and have run out of things to pretend not to notice. "You know what Daddy would have said," she said. Leonard smiled. "Don't tell me." "He would have said, 'Let the man carry his own shame. Don't pick it up for him.'" She paused. "And then he would have told you to eat something." Leonard looked around the room. "There's a vending machine by the elevator. It only has those awful granola bars. I checked. I'll find something." He stood. He put his hand on hers, just briefly, the way people do when words have reached their limit and touch is the more honest language. "Get some sleep," he said. "You too," she said. "And Leonard." He stopped at the door. "Don't you dare not come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll be here at 8, he said. He walked out into the hallway. The night shift had started. The corridor was quieter now, different quality of light, the hum of a building that has settled into its nighttime self. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He stood there in his gray wool coat with his paper coffee cup, waiting. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Inside, there was a man about Vosburg's age. Different man, hospital staff from the badge. Someone Leonard had not seen before and would likely not see again. The man looked at Leonard the way people look at strangers in elevators, briefly, without much registering. Then the man looked again. Something shifted. Are you Dr. Achib?" "Leonard Achib?" Leonard stepped into the elevator. "I am," he said. The man's face did the thing faces do when they make a connection they weren't expecting. "I was at your keynote at the CTS conference in 2019. In Vancouver." He shook his head, the way people shake their heads when they're trying to describe something that mattered to them. "I'm in cardiology at this hospital. Residency, 2nd year. That talk, the one about outcome disparities in post-operative care. I've thought about it probably once a month since." The elevator doors closed. "I'm glad it was useful," Leonard said. The resident looked at him, then at the floor he'd pressed, then back at him. "Are you? Is someone you know here?" "My sister," Leonard said. "I hope she gets well soon." "She will," Leonard said. "Dr. Nwosu is looking after her." "Oh, he's great," the resident said. "Really great." The elevator opened on the ground floor. "He is," Leonard said. He stepped out. He walked through the lobby, past the information desk, past the gift shop that was already closed for the night with the gate half down, past the donation wall with its brass plaques. He pushed through the main doors into the November night. The cold hit him the way November cold always hits, not gradually, but all at once, like a decision. He stood on the steps for a moment. The parking lot lights were on, orange-white, reflecting off the thin layer of snow that had come down while he was inside. His car was somewhere in the 3rd row. He would find it. He would get a hotel room near the hospital. He would be back at 8 tomorrow morning. Gray coat, paper coffee cup, waiting room chair. He would do what he always did. He walked down the steps and into the night, his breath visible in the cold air, rising and disappearing the way all things eventually do. The day's indignities and the day's small graces both dissolving into the same dark sky, leaving behind only what a man carries with him because he chose to, because it belongs to him, because no one gets to decide that for him but himself.